Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll be talking about the Indian economy. Now, I personally believe that any policy prescription in the context of the economy must aim at ensuring that those living at the bottom of the pyramid are empowered. In other words, they get more money into their pockets so that they can spend more, and it's the majority of them spend more, it will fuel the economy. But we're living in a world in which governments want to proclaim they have done wonders. And you know how fast the Indian economy is growing. It's growing at 6.5% in 2025. And they're saying that, look, it's the fastest growing economy in the world. But they always tell you the half-truth. The truth really is that really makes no difference if it's the fastest-growing economy in the world. What are the policy prescriptions that have empowered people at the bottom of the pyramid? We all know that 800 million people, that is 80 crore people, are living on food subsidies. They don't have any power to invest, any power to ensure that their lives get better. Schooling is expensive. And where it's not expensive, there are no teachers. Healthcare is expensive. Healthcare is not available to many. And in a sense, the disparity between the rich and the poor has increased over the years. Now, no government can say that, look, they didn't have enough time. This government had 11 years now to fix the economy. And yet, the fact of the matter is they only talk about $5 trillion, which also they've not reached. They talk about 6.5% or 9.3% and the fastest growing economy in the world. But what is the per capita income of our people? Even that doesn't tell you the whole story, because even per capita income depends on, the rich earn, for example, in a family of 5, if one person is earning 1 crore and the others are earning 50,000 each, the per capita will be 1 crore plus 2 lakhs divided by 5. So the per capita will be high. But the fact of the matter is that 4 of the 5 members of that family will be poor. So that also doesn't tell you the entire story. But even with per capita, in the BRICS countries, we're the lowest per capita, $2,888, I believe, per person. As compared to South Africa, which is around 6,000, Brazil, which is about 10,000, China, which is about 33,000. So what has this country done about the economy? And I'm sorry to say that, at least that's my own feeling, that they don't really care. They are interested in propaganda. They're interested in telling half-truths to this country. So today is an opportunity for us, and I'm with 3 extraordinary people, to find out what the truth is. Thank you very much, Dr. Sen, for being with me today.
Pleasure.
What can I say about you? You're an economic statistician, MA economics from George Washington, PhD from Johns Hopkins. You taught at Johns Hopkins from 77 to 83. You did research with ICRIER, 83 to 1987. 1990 to 94, you were economic advisor to the Department of Electronics. You were in the Planning Commission in 94. You've really authored 4 5-year plans. You worked with the World Bank, the IMF, my God. So much to talk about. So we'll find out what your views are on this. Arun, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
You're an expert on the black economy, which we'll talk about some other day, as to what's the state of our black economy. 84 to 2015, you were a professor of economics in JNU, authored several books and a contributor. I see you on television every day and your articles all over the place, so thank you very much for being here. Jayati, thank you for being here. If I start reading about what you've done, it's going to take a whole 10 minutes again. But I must say that you completed your undergraduate from Miranda House, economics from JNU, pursued your MPhil PhD in Cambridge in the UK, got a doctoral thesis from there, taught economics in JNU for 35 years. My God, that's a long time. 1986 to 2020. You've written about 21 books, authored 220 scholarly articles, worked with UNDP, UNCTAD, and you were advisor to the UN Secretary General's High-Level Advisory Board. So I just go on, and I keep, of course, reading about it. But tell me, Doc, what's the real state of our economy?
Stable.
Okay.
Okay? Which, in this day and age, is something to perhaps even cheer about.
Okay.
The rest of the world is really in dire shape. But having said that, the stability that we have, is that the stability we desire? And that was, in a sense, I think, the point you were trying to make. Yes, we are stable. Yes, we have a situation where corporate India is doing well. Yes, we are in a situation where non-corporate India continues to struggle. But it's been this way now for 8 to 9 years. And in a sense, I think, if you sort of look around, people take this as the new normal.
Okay. The poor remain poor and the rich
the poor
are getting
remain
richer.
poor, the rich are getting way richer.
Right.
So
hasn't something gone wrong in between in terms of our economic priorities and policies?
well, I don't know whether it's gone wrong. The question really is, what is the objective? If your objective is essentially to improve the lot of the people, then it has gone wrong. If your objective is to try and show a reasonable growth rate, you've done it right. If your objective was to accelerate the growth rate so that we actually can get to a situation where people are being drawn into the economic processes, we have gone badly wrong. So, we always used to talk about what should be the growth rate of India. And more or less all of us agreed to be somewhere between 7.5% and 9%. We are stuck at a 6 to 6.5% range, and we're going to be there.
Yes.
But that is stable.
Next year projections are also that, 6.5. Yes.
The medium-term projections will all give you that. And I don't see any upside on it. Downsides I can see, but upside I'm not seeing it.
But if they had different policy prescriptions, I mean, have they done enough with policy prescriptions to change the dynamics of the nature of our economy?
We'll be getting into that in the course of the conversation. Because, yes, there is. So today, just to give you an example of how dire things are, a person borrowing, taking a working capital loan for 4 months, is paying just 0.5 percentage point less interest rate than a corporate which is borrowing 20-year funds. Just 0.5%, right? Any economist will tell you that is wrong. If, as with time, uncertainty increases and you demand a higher return. But in India, we've kept that almost equal. So what ends up happening is you are incentivizing capital-intensive methods of production and, in a sense, leaving the labor behind.
Right.
And that's a policy failure. This is not something that's happening with the market. It's a clear out-and-out policy failure.
Let me ask you, how many people pay income tax in this country? I mean, effective income tax.
So, about 9 crores are those who are either TDS payers or those who file a return.
Out of 140 crores?
Out of 140 crores.
Okay.
Out of this, about 6.5 crores either file nil return or very little. So you effectively have about 2.5 crores who are in the tax net. Out of this also, as per the Prime Minister's 15th August speech, only 1.5 crore are effective taxpayers who pay substantial amount of tax.
Right. Those must be the really rich ones.
The well-off, yes. Yeah. Those who are earning above 25 lakhs of rupees, they are the well-off. And if you look at also the data from the e-Shram portal, where your unorganized sector people were supposed to register, because the Supreme Court scolded the government during the pandemic and said how many people are in the unorganized sector you should know. So they set up the e-Shram portal. Now in that, as per the Prime Minister's Parliament statement, 30 crores have registered there.
Okay.
out of which 90% say they are earning less than 10,000 rupees a month. Okay, so that's the state. I mean, they're close to poverty line, you know. So in other words, the gap between the organized sector and the unorganized sector is huge. Those who are in the organized sector getting all the benefits. And it is that growth that you see.
And 80 to 90% are in the unorganized sector.
So as per the Rajya Sabha question 2017, 94% are in the unorganized sector, okay? So 94% are working in the unorganized sector, 6% are working in the organized sector, and the growth that you see is of the 6%. And the gap between the 6% and the 94%, that's what is increasing. And that's why you see massive unemployment in the unorganized sector, you know. So when we talk about unemployment, it's women's unemployment, it is the educated youth between the age group of 15 to 29 who don't have jobs, who are looking for jobs, you know. So there's massive unemployment in the economy. And unemployment is also of different kind. One is you're looking for a job, not finding it. Other is you're underemployed. You stand in the market for 12 hours, you get 2 hours of work, so you're underemployed. Then there's disguised unemployment in agriculture and in trade. You know, the whole family sits at the shop, but only one person is needed. Or the whole family goes to the farm, but only one person is needed. So there's disguised unemployment. And then there are those who have given up looking for work. So the labor force participation rate in India is very low compared to other big countries, you know. So that means that means less people working, so therefore the family has to have more people being supported by the person earning. So this gap between the unorganized and organized is huge, and that is what is creating the problem. And that's why my argument is that GDP data is incorrect. Because you see, the unorganized sector data comes with a time lag. For the quarterly data that comes, you assume that the unorganized sector is growing roughly at the same rate as the organized sector. Now that may have been true before the demonetization, but demonetization affected the unorganized sector. Next year, you again had a shock of GST, and third year you had the NBFC shock, and then finally the 2020 shock was the lockdown, sudden lockdown. So because of these shocks, and the methodology is that you project from the previous year into this year.
Right.
Now, if you're projecting from the previous year into this year when the shock is there, then obviously your data would be incorrect, and then you project further from that, then you use the benchmark estimates. Benchmarks were created before the shocks came, so you needed to correct that. So my argument is that the rate of growth is not 6.5%, but it's more like 2.5%, you know, because the 6.5% is the rate of growth.
That's another controversy.
Yeah, the rate of growth of organized sector is 6.5%, what you see. But the unorganized sector...
The reality is people at the bottom of the pyramid
are the ones who are suffering. And you can see example like, say, the trade sector, which is the second largest employer. E-commerce is growing at 20-30%. So the neighborhood stores are going down, and neighborhood stores are labor intensive. E-commerce is capital intensive. Similarly, you see that in the FMCG sector, you see that in the leather goods sector, you see that in the pressure cooker sector. So a declining sector is proxied by a rising sector, so GDP is overestimated. Now, the implication of that is if the unorganized sector was growing at 6%, the unemployment would not have been so large. It's actually because declining, that's why the unemployment situation is as bad as it is. And therefore, in a sense, Indian economy is splitting apart, inequalities are growing, and that's why the demand is short, and the demand is short, capacity utilization becomes short, and RBI's data on capacity utilization comes from the organized sector. That is showing it's hovering between 70-75%. That's inadequate for investment boost. So private sector investment is low, and the finance ministry keeps saying the public sector investment has been raised, but private sector is not coming forward to invest. So they're not.
Even the public sector investment is giving some employment opportunities.
But that's going into capital intensive sectors. When you have public,
stuff like that.
Big highways, now see, earlier you used to employ a lot of people there. Now with big cranes, big bulldozers, you don't have much employment generation there. So where do you get employment generation? In rural employment guarantee scheme, in education, in health, in rural development. All those are cut. You know.
That's true.
So therefore,
let me move on to you, Jayathiya. In a country where, after all, jobs are created when the manufacturing sector is doing well. And manufacturing sector in India, I believe, if you look at the GDP, it's only 13 to 15% of the GDP. As opposed to China, which is, I believe now 30%, and it's going to be about 45%. Of the total goods manufactured in the world, it's manufacturing about 30% today, and it will be 45%. I believe this is the kind of data I have.
Oh, you mean China's share of global manufacturing?
Share of the global manufacturing. That's why there's huge employment there. and our share of manufacturing, where the GDP is only 13 to 15%. Where are going to people get jobs?
So, that's a more complex question about manufacturing. I come back to that, but I just want to emphasize what Arun was saying about employment. Because, I mean, I'm not a big fan of GDP as an indicator of progress. But supposing you think of other alternatives, and there's lots of stuff going on now, in fact, in the UN, discussions about other measures. One of the measures we had suggested, and which is actually being considered, is the labor market indicator, which is the proportion of people in employment, that is, of the working age population. So you're not looking at the unemployment rate, which has many other issues. The people of working age who are employed into the median wage. That is, the wage, half of the distribution is below that, the other half is above. And that's actually a better indicator than the average wage data that we throw around, because that gets skewed at the top. Right. Now, if you look at the labor market indicator for India, in fact, it's really quite interesting. Per capita GDP has been going up. Labor market indicator has been stagnant and falling. So, when you were talking about the bottom half of the population has actually been doing worse in this period of 6 to 7% rate of growth. So a big issue in our entire development project is our inability to generate jobs.
So that's why I asked you the question on manufacturing.
Yes. So the problem is that manufacturing will no longer generate jobs. We have to recognize, I mean, manufacturing is important for many other reasons. It has synergies, it's critical for technological development, knowledge, etc. We cannot avoid manufacturing. But we cannot expect manufacturing to give us jobs anymore.
Because the nature of the global economy has changed.
And technology.
Right?
China, by the way, the share of workers in manufacturing has been falling for 14 years in China because they are just getting much more productive. They are doing much more automation.
But they're getting more skilled also.
Well, it's automation, mechanization, robotization. They're global leaders in all of that.
Correct.
But it really means the manufacturing of the future is not job generating. Okay, so we have to recognize that. But therefore think of other ways of generating employment and good quality employment.
How do you do that?
Well, two obvious things. We are among the worst under providers of basic public services. Okay, health spending per population. I mean, health spending we have, I think, what, 1% of GDP at the moment? 1.2%. Yeah.
Yes.
The average for middle-income countries is 3.5. For middle income, not, I'm not talking about the other countries which have higher proportions.
It's actually 9%.
Brazil, it's 11%.
That's correct.
Thailand, it's 8%.
Correct.
So, we are way below. Education, similarly. And so, basically, these are all employment-generating activities with very high multiplier effects. So, that's one way in which you focus employment generation.
That's a long-term thing now, because by the time you set right your education system, by the time you have skill development programs, it's going to take 5-7 years. What's going to happen?
No, wait. Why is it long term? Just filling vacancies in central and state governments gives you 15 million jobs.
But
just filling the vacancies.
Are people equipped to fill those vacancies?
Yes, people are equipped. We are not filling the vacancies.
Because we don't have the money to...
we keep saying skill mismatch, etc., etc. I don't buy all of that.
Okay.
We have people, we have educated people, they will also learn on the job. They're not, they're not all stupid. And so, in fact, if we just begin by filling vacancies, you're already generating, I think, 13 million was the last time I calculated. Significant, which has, again, positive multiplier effects. However, on manufacturing, and I think there Arun's point is so important, you see, it's not, the crazy thing that has happened over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, is that it's not just corporate sector, but within the corporate sector, there is such concentration. So around, one study found, 90% of profits going to the top 100 companies. Corporate profits. Now, corporate has already got way ahead of all your MSMEs, right? But then within corporate, there is this massive inequality as well. So we have to focus a lot of our industrial policy on the MSMEs. We have really no proper focus.
If you look at the world, whether it was Japan or Taiwan, it is these MSMEs kind of structures that actually give a boost to the economy. And here we've been languishing.
We haven't. There was a time when the MSMEs were the leaders in our growth.
That's what I'm saying now.
The 2000s.
Yes.
But after the series of shocks that Jyoti talked about, it all tanked.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, what are you doing about it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's ask.
MSME has to be divided up between the micro, small, and medium. You know, small and medium are 6 lakh units, roughly, and micro are 6 crore units, and large are 6,000. So there's a factor of 100 between them. And it's the micro units that employ 97.5% of the MSME, this thing.
Do they have access to capital at low interest
Very
rates?
low, very little capital, and very little access. So it's the micro sector which has to be revived, because that's 97.5% of the employment of the MSME sector.
How would you give loans to them when there's no collateral?
No,
So then how does that happen? I mean,
Let me put it to you very bluntly.
okay.
It's not going to happen in the banking sector with our banking laws. All right? But these people are getting funds, and they're getting it from money lenders.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Now, the question is, how should you look at money lenders? I mean, we've all grown up with the mindset that money lenders, by definition, are bad people.
Bloodsuckers.
They are bloodsuckers. Yes, they are.
They are.
But the point
I've
is,
seen some
without
of them in court.
the micro sector would be dead.
Yes.
Right? You can't duplicate that in the formal system. Formal systems will have rules which will effectively prevent it. Nobody's running. So the question is, how do you look at money lenders?
Well, Reserve Bank of India for NBFCs controls the rates of interest.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So you can have a legislation which does that.
Yeah.
No, but these are beyond the
But this is
NBFCs
beyond.
also.
These are beyond, these are outside.
But
of
you
any
have legislation in West Bengal, and I know, where even private sector lending is controlled.
Yeah.
So you can do that.
So
You could, but by doing that, are you really achieving the purpose? That's
I don't know. Let's
So-
find
so
out if there's a solution. That's
no,
fine.
I mean,
in our analysis, what we did was, we said for the micro sector, individually they can't, form groups. So say like in Bhadoi, you have carpets, in say Chalkaranji, you have textiles, in Khurja, you have pottery, etc. Form their cooperatives. And through cooperatives, then you get loan. And technology is very crucial. They have to upgrade technology.
Yes.
For that, government has to provide it. So the 3 things, marketing, technology, and finance, if you form cooperatives. And there are these clusters that are developing.
Which
So
it's,
through that
it's in other sectors of the economy, we have that.
So
No, and cooperatives are the way to go. That is really the only way.
And this government has paid no attention.
No, it's
No,
dropped
it's
off the
the
radar
other worse.
completely.
I know, it's worse.
It's
The
worse.
cooperative sector and industry has been taken over by our home minister.
Oh.
And there's a reason for that. So in other words, you're not just ignoring cooperative sector, you're actually destroying it.
Okay.
So like Maharashtra cooperatives, the sugar cooperatives, etc.
we know that,
We know what happens.
Cash cows.
So we have to really, formalize these cooperatives in such a way that, there's no concentration. And
Arun, cooperatives are controlled by politicians. We all know that. Maharashtra, the sugar lobby is all controlled by politicians.
Yes.
The cooperatives all controlled.
But we have to try something. If we don't try something, we are not going to get anywhere.
If you try something, you should have a government which looks at people, implements policies that are people-oriented.
Yes.
This
Absolutely.
government looks at policies which is industry-oriented, which, big
Not only
conglomerates
industry,
oriented.
but crony capitalist oriented.
That's true.
And that's where the investment climate is getting destroyed, because, out of the 250,000 high net worth individuals, roughly 50,000 have gone abroad, because they are worried that they will get taken over, by the favorites. And therefore the investment climate is bad, not only because of demand, but also because of the fear. So people are going abroad rather
Even
than investing
FDI,
here.
this time the FDI this year,
The net FDI.
Yes.
No, the net FDI.
net FDI.
No, but there's a story in that, right? So if you look at gross FDI, it's actually gone up. But outflow has shot up.
Short
So the net FDI has come down.
96%.
The question that somebody should be asking is, why has so much FDI simply upped and left the country?
I'll tell you, ED, CBI, income
So the
tax,
climate,
right? Retrospective,
Yeah, exactly.
all that.
Yes.
Why would people stay here?
But this is the legitimate question. So you look at the newspaper reporting. Net FDI low means people aren't sending money here. The fact of the matter is gross FDI has gone up. people are sending, but people who have come here have gone back out.
Right.
And people who are here are also going out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's a different story.
So this crony capitalism is really killing the investment.
Okay, now the Prime Minister talks about Make in India program. Where has the Make in India program taken us?
It's a failure. No, I mean, I don't think
Absolute
there's any
failure.
question about it, that it's a huge
Well,
failure.
yeah, manufacturing was the focus, and
Exactly.
the share of manufacturing GDP has actually dropped.
Yeah, 13% now.
Yeah, it's gone down by 3.5%.
Correct. So then Make in India is a failure. So the only thing we make in India are a propaganda.
Yeah, we're very
That's
good
the
at
only
that.
thing we're very good at
Yes,
that.
Vishwaguru propaganda.
Vishwaguru,
yes.
that's what Make in
Yes.
India is in this country.
But you see, if they had instead had a focus on MSMEs and category specific, sector specific, cluster specific, you could have actually achieved quite a lot. It's not something impossible.
Well, how can you possibly have, that kind of policy prescription when through electoral bonds you take money from big people? Now, at some point, there has to be a payback. So, all the big projects.
Well, yes and no. But remember, one of the first things that this government did in 2014 was the mudra. And the mudra loan was not a bad idea.
Yes.
Designed terribly.
Designed terribly.
Oh, I see. Just tell viewers as to why it was designed terribly.
The way it was designed, the rules governing the mudra loans, firstly, they were forced onto the banks. Kicking and screaming, banks don't like it at all. The second is the rules were such that to actually access the mudra loan was extremely difficult.
And
Now,
they
I've
were
been
really
on
small, like drops,
Yeah.
30,000.
I'm on the board of banks.
Okay.
And one has seen what has been happening to these mudra loans. The mudra loan so what happens is you lend to small industries who are already your customers, you'd have lent to them anyway, except you tell them, please don't take it from a regular working capital window, you take a mudra loan instead. So you're meeting the targets, right? But not really achieving the purpose, which is to create new MSMEs. Right? So it was badly designed. But at least the thought was there. Okay? Second, when was it? Couple of years back, 2-3 years back, they guaranteed working capital to MSMEs. The government guaranteed it.
Yes, guaranteed, yes.
Again, not a bad idea.
But never worked on the ground.
Has it worked? No.
I
So you've got a sequence of recognitions without effectiveness.
I think we have to split up the MSME into micro separate and small and medium separate. Because small and medium takes all the benefits, whatever you give for MSME, and is not going to the micro sector. It's the micro sector and the small sector that you want to revive. And GST has affected the small sector and the micro sector terribly because they are outside the input credit. Okay, they're not part of GST, so they don't get input credit. So their costs have not fallen, but the large scale costs have fallen. So in competition, demand is shifting towards the organized sector. So we need to reform GST and make it is a last point tax. It can be collected simply at the last point. We don't need to collect it at 100 different stages, which complicates it.
Or have a refund.
Or have a refund. But even that will
But then
require
these small ones
administrative.
get excluded from the
administrative
refund process.
problems will be there. Na? So basically, if you do a last point tax, it is a last point tax, implemented the last point, that'll free up the small and the micro sector from all this problem of the organized sector finding its cost decreasing, but their cost remaining the same. So demand is shifting. So we've been arguing that we need reform of GST. We need to separate the micro from the small and medium so that the micro can be targeted specifically, and that through the cooperatives. Whatever be the political problems of cooperatives, etc., if you are able to do that, build those.
You've done it in milk, you've done it in some sectors of the economy.
So some sectors have succeeded. You can, but you can succeed if you have the will. But
Kutumbashri in Kerala is focused on micro, and it's a federation of self-help groups, but they have moved well beyond just managing credit to production. They have associations for coir production, for actually farming, and for a whole range of activities, and they're successful.
Right. So well, I think this government has been very lucky. The agricultural growth this year was about 4.6%. 4.6%. We sort of brought that growth rate to 6.5.
But Kapil,
but for that, it would have been really
Agriculture
disaster.
experts say there's a problem in measuring the agriculture's contribution to GDP also. Because last
You
year,
have problems with all these statistics.
yes, I have problems with all the statistics.
But it's
It's true.
It's true.
See, in agriculture last year, we said there was a record output, right?
Yeah.
And still, we then banned or we put stock holding limits. Prices didn't fall. Then we banned exports. Prices still didn't fall. So why? Only unless the output wasn't what it was, the prices should have fallen. Prices didn't fall. Prices kept rising. So people have been saying from
But at the
agriculture
same
that there
time,
is-
some people say that because of 4.6%, the consumption in the rural sector is actually fueling the economy. This is what the narrative is today. That look, the
Where's the evidence?
consumption in the rural sector has gone up. That's what
Where's the evidence?
they have said. That's what they say.
No, so the consumption share in GDP has gone up
Gone
a
up.
little bit,
That's right. That's
But
what they're
there's a catch there. The catch is that agriculture share in GDP is about 16%.
Yes, 16
Okay,
to 18%.
so even
yes.
if that goes up by 2%, how much is it going to go? 0.03%. Okay, that's not going to boost consumption very much. So agriculture's contribution to GDP being very low is not that agriculture is going to give a big boost. Yes, it will help some, right? What you need to do is services. Services now 55% of GDP. That is where you have to give a
Services
boost.
are the creamy layer of this country are involved.
No, services are everywhere. Unorganized,
You
organized.
come back to the same question, what are you doing about 800 million, 900 million people of this country?
No, but then, again, the question is that services are not a homogeneous group.
Exactly.
Right? So again, you can broadly classify services into two categories. One are services that you and I directly consume. Right? Other are services which are being provided to the production sectors. And the production sectors are usually agriculture and manufacturing and other services.
Right.
And if you really look at the breakup of services and you do a rough classification, they're about 50-50. Right? Now, I can see a situation where our consumption of services will continue to grow. But the point is that the other half depends upon your production sectors to grow strongly as well. Otherwise, their growth is not going to happen. Right? So one again needs to be careful. I mean, just lumping everything under services, I think we are doing a disservice to ourselves.
Okay, so let's...
And also services are in the unorganized sector and organized sector both. You have a dhaba and you have a 5-star hotel.
That's correct.
You have a rickshawala and you have the trains, right?
Correct,
So
correct.
it's both unorganized and organized. It's the unorganized sector that needs to come up.
That's
you know,
true.
organized sector, the organized sector 6% will demand and they'll get the organized sector services.
Correct.
But it's a chain.
Right.
If the unorganized sector does well, then all the unorganized sector, the services in the unorganized sector, and as he's saying very rightly, they're consumptive services and productive services. Those that you need for production and those that are consumptive.
This discussion sort of, disappoints me in the sense that it seems to me that the poor are not on the radar of this government at all.
Yeah.
That's what it seems to me from what you tell
Yes.
me.
Well, look, I don't know whether it's on their radar. The point is they don't seem to know what to do about it.
Okay.
Okay, there are two different things.
Provide some money.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what they give you.
provide some money and hope like
transfers
it works.
before
That's right,
elections
that's
and
right.
things like that. Yes.
So, that's not going to improve the lot of the poor.
No, it's basically employment, conditions of employment, and viability of small producers. I mean, these are critical, right? And also farming. I mean, it's true, it's only
Exactly.
16%, but still about half of our workforce. And farmers' movement has made very clear, specific, and doable demands. Completely ignored now for a very long time.
And in fact, corporatizing, like the 3 farm bills, they were going to corporatize the trade in agriculture commodities.
Would have been disastrous.
That would have marginalized them further. You were doing away with APMCs. We saw what happened in Bihar in 2005 because of the APMCs. The farmers in Bihar were getting half of what they were getting in Haryana and UP, and therefore they were transporting, the traders were transporting from Bihar into UP and West Bengal. So this government has to be sensitive to the unorganized sector, sensitive to the people at the bottom, and that's not there and that's visible in the budget. Every time the fiscal deficit rises, they cut the schemes for employment generation and they provide more
What's
for
the fiscal deficit this year? I believe it's 4.7%.
4.8% or thereabouts. Yeah.
And the objective was to bring it down to 4.3.
So there's a glide path that they have, and I think Pranav
why don't
support
you-
that it's going down. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
it was
with
supposed
a
to-
lot of off-budget stuff continuing. Let's not ignore that.
True. The question then is it going up or down? The off budgets have been there for
A long time.
Forever.
Every government.
Every
That's
government
right.
has off
Yes,
budgets.
including yours.
I said every government has.
Yes.
So,
Every government.
and I don't think any of us who actually work it, we actually sit down and work out what the growth rate of the off-budget items are.
You know, I had done that. I had
Okay,
done that a while
that's
ago, and it had gone up significantly.
Okay.
But this was, I think I did it, it's already now by 2018. So God knows what's happened since then. But it had
One
gone
more-
up to 2018.
One more thing is we have to worry about decentralization. Our states are suffering. And that's where a lot of the programs of employment, education, health,
Well, the
etc.
states are
there.
not allowed to
And-
borrow. That's another problem.
Well, if you're the wrong political
Yes.
party.
Yeah, I know that.
And also the resource transfer from the centers. You know,
Yeah,
Jyoti has
yeah.
been writing on that. You know, it's gone down in between to
From
35%,
41%,
31%.
it has gone down to 30 or
32% or, you know,
32%,
in
yeah.
between 35%. So they are suffering, and therefore they are unable to carry forward these programs for the poor people because they are the directly people. Then our local bodies, you know, they lack resources. So local bodies also have to be brought up, you know. So that's why this division between center, state and local bodies is very important. And our finance commission should look at that, you know.
Okay, let's move on to something else because I think that we've done a lot of discussion on the state of our economy. But what's going to happen to the economy and the impact on the Indian economy on what's happening around the world? Trump, China, and its impact on India. China and ASEAN, China and BRICS, China and Russia together now, wars going on. How's it going to impact us? Can you give some thought to that?
Well, let me put it this way. We face much less damage from what is happening in the US, what Mr. Trump is doing unto us. The bigger damage is really a collateral damage between the US-China war, because that's going to affect us quite seriously, both in terms of our domestic market as well as in terms of the export markets that we were addressing. And that is deeply worrying. At the moment, we are not seeing that effect simply because things are still up in the air. Yeah, it's all paused.
It's all paused, yes.
The Chinese have started becoming a little more aggressive on their export front, but not a whole lot more yet. But that's going to happen if Trump actually goes on with his agenda. So our real problem is going to be China. Because China will desperately need to keep their economy alive. It's already under serious pressure. And they have to break out of it. If the US is not going to absorb Chinese products, then the rest of the world
US
is.
no choice, according to me. They'll have to absorb them. because
Well, through third country,
yeah, they'll come there.
so that's already started.
I would say the other way around. I think the damage is done. Even if they come to a deal, etc., etc.,
Yeah,
the
the
damage
damage-
is done globally because globally we're having a significant deceleration of investment. Who's going to invest in this period of uncertainty? Which then leads to global recession and all of the associated implications. Now, I think what Mukul is saying, look, China has got a deal with ASEAN, a trade deal with
Yes,
ASEAN.
yes, yes.
ASEAN has a trade deal with India.
Correct.
So the whole rules of origin business, it is very, very likely that we will get some of that surplus. But remember, US is only 13% of China's exports now. They've already diversified. They did a lot of it through Vietnam,
They did it a lot,
Cambodia.
yeah.
But a lot means not that much. They have actually significantly diversified to Africa and Latin America. You're right, we will get some of that impact, but I don't think that much. You know what my bigger fear is? My bigger fear is the response of the Indian government to the trade threat. Because, I mean, I don't know which are the people who, according to Trump, kissed his ass and did everything, said we will do everything. But we do know that the Indian government was very anxious to strike a deal. And my fear is that the kind of deal we'll strike is not about trade. It's about things like Starlink, which we've already succumbed to. It's about things like further tightening of intellectual property, which will affect our pharma. It is about things like other FDI rules that would ease a lot of our dependence on defense equipment from the US. So my fear is that this uncertainty is going to cause the Indian government to give away a lot more than we can afford to.
What about they'll want their export of agricultural products?
All export of agricultural products is definitely on their list. Right. I mean, I have concerns about how the government is dealing with this. That's my fear.
Cut in the budget, some of the tariffs. They're signaling to the US that we are willing to do that. And you notice with Trump, anybody who signals that they're willing to do something, then he extracts more. Anybody who stands firm,
it's the typical bully.
Is bullying. So China stood firm, so he's reduced by 115%.
That's true.
Canada stood firm, EU standing firm. So the point is, how much impact does all this have on the US economy? Because the US economy,
and how much leverage we have in the context
but
of
we have to look at, the US
yes.
with tariffs will face inflation, and there'll be a decline in demand. So there's a possibility of recession. First quarter that it declined. But if there's a recession and a price rise, it's like a stagflationary situation. Other countries, if they get to an agreement that they don't do dumping on each other and they don't increase tariffs, because if everybody does dumping, everybody will increase tariffs, and then there'll be a global trade war and there'll be a long-term recession. Yeah. So if everybody agrees, China agrees, we don't do dumping, but because there's a space, because what India was exporting now can be exported to China, what China was exporting can be exported to EU, because now the EU is not doing it. So if we all agree, and they've opened negotiations with EU, they've opened negotiations with Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia, and also to India. If we all agree not to raise tariffs and increase this thing, we will be affected less, America would be affected much more, and therefore America would be forced to withdraw.
It's unlikely that that's going to happen.
No, but
I can tell you that.
But he's a transactional man. He might.
You might know, actually. Why is it that nobody is saying, let's collectively go back to WTO?
Nobody's saying.
No, they are. There's a huge, I mean, if, of all people, the Europeans are saying it big time. Okay. Latin Americans are saying it. There's a lot of stuff going on there. In fact, Joe Stiglitz calls it G-1.
Yeah. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. So all of us getting
just
together
pretend
like
they're
going
not
to
there.
WTO. It's multilateral as opposed to bilateral,
So
make it multilateral.
This is the time actually to strengthen WTO.
Except, I mean, let's also agree that not everything in the WTO was all wonderful. But given
the
basic
rules,
on this route, multilateral, I mean, there is a lot of discussion. Well, I find it very interesting. The US withdrew from the UN tax negotiations. Yes. They are carrying on as if nothing's happened. Okay. It's really fascinating to see that all these countries are there. It's just like, okay, one person left the room, no problem, The financing for development discussion, again, US was a big player, right? Yeah. US is clearly going to either not come or be obstructionist. They're carrying on as if nothing's happened.
That's good.
G20, US has declared it will not come. I mean, the South Africans are hyperactive on everything with the other members. So I have a feeling countries are doing this.
It's in their best interest. And actually, if US withdraws what it's doing, that'd be good for everybody in the long run.
Okay, now
including the US.
Yeah,
including
for the US.
The last thing we just discuss is our situation with the Chinese, because the kind of distortion, kind of limited exports we have, and the exports by China into India has got $101 billion now, right? And we are exporting what, 20 billion?
17, 18
billion.
Where would this take us?
Deficit, yeah.
They're controlling everything.
But that's because we've been stupid, not because they have been manipulative. I do want to emphasize this. Look, we were the world's biggest producer of bulk drugs. We gave it up in liberalization. We are now importing 90% of our bulk drugs from China. And yet then we're saying, oh, we'll be all aggressive. They could stop our pharmaceutical industry tomorrow.
Yes, that's what I mean.
That's the kind of dependence we have created, but we created that.
How do we get out of it?
By building the bulk drug production back again.
We need protection for that.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
You will need
R&D,
protection for that.
Yes.
R&D,
So,
we are very
as you
weak.
said,
You know,
Well,
we are
R&D
spending-
where it's disaster. I
Yes.
mean, they have
So
absolutely.
that's what is needed.
This government's biggest failure, according to me, is not bothering about R&D in this
No,
country.
but that's been long-standing. But the point is, that without R&D, you will not be able to upgrade. You will not be able to compete
Nothing.
globally.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
and what's happened is that we are spending 0.65% of GDP on R&D. They're spending 3%, and they're 5 times
Arey
bigger.
bhaiya,
So they spend
$50 billion
25 times more.
us and $650 billion the
Exactly.
US,
So-
$500 billion China. That's what's being spent on R&D. Where are we going to
So
compete?
we have to have a
with these?
strategy, actually, Kapil. We
Well,
don't have a strategy.
Your strategy is to win an election. That's your only strategy. Come what may, tell the people half-truths, less than truth, win an election, go on, have another 5-year term, not bother about the real people in this country who need the benevolent hand of the government. Forget the people, think of our politics, think of winning elections. That's what it is. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.